Welcome to the Winning Platform Owner Podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to enabling ServiceNow platform owners with valuable knowledge, tools, and strategies. In this episode, you'll get to meet a standout enterprise architect, and you'll get to hear his perspectives on the ServiceNow platform. So, if you're interested in an enterprise architect's angle on ServiceNow, then you'll love this episode. So, let's go. Well, welcome to the show. If you're joining us for the first time, glad you're here, and welcome back to the rest of the team of Winning Platform Owners. Ben Pierce here. I'm your host on the Winning Platform Owner Podcast. This podcast is all about helping ServiceNow platform owners become winning platform owners. It's all about helping platform owners become successful in their role. And that's what we're all about here on the podcast. Well, this episode has been a little longer in the making than a typical episode, and even edited down. It's probably one of the longest episodes. In fact, I know it's one of the longest episodes that we've got in the history of the show so far. But I'm telling you, it is well worth the time to get to listen in on the perspectives that Chris Munson brings to ServiceNow platform owners. Chris and I go back several years, and he was kind enough to agree to let me pick his brain when it comes to ServiceNow. Here's the thing about Chris. He's one of those rare folks who's incredibly smart. Lots in that big brain of his, but he's so down to earth and really just cares about doing things well technically, but he also cares about the people around him. So it made him great to work with, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. This one is also full of those little nuggets that you want to roll back 10 seconds, listen to it again, and jot it down. It's that kind of episode. So I'm going to get out of the way here. We're going to jump into the interview where we'll get to meet Chris a little bit and then start asking him questions and get to hear his response. Chris, welcome to the show, and glad you're here, sir.
Well, thanks for having me.
You betcha. So let's just start out by getting to know Chris Munson, the person, and tell us a little bit about you, who Chris is, and what makes you tick.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of a boring person, but I originally hail from the beautiful state of Montana. I grew up there, spent like the first 30 years of my life there before I moved to Denver, Colorado. Avid sports lover, mostly baseball. Those that know me know I'm an insane Rockies fan, which has been kind of painful for most of the time I have been here. But, you know, there was the one World Series year, and, every so often I do make all of the games in a season. So I do have that little tidbit of trivia occasionally. I'm 10 days away from my 29th wedding anniversary, so I'm looking forward to celebrating that soon. I have been in information technology for roughly 30 years, going back to when I was first in college, just basically manning, a help desk type of scenario. Been in enterprise architecture for like the last 20 years. I've worked in almost every aspect of IT you can think of, software and web development, data, infrastructure. When I worked with you, Ben, I was lucky enough to own the ServiceNow CMDB. I found it really valuable for my architecture work. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Cool. All right. So yeah, like when did you get involved in enterprise architecture, and kind of how did you kind of grow into that?
Well, actually, when I first moved to Denver, my very first job in Denver IT was actually as a solution architect for Great West Life and Annuity. They're now Empower Financial. And that's really where I got my start, because I had done all of these different things, right? And I didn't even know architecture existed until I saw that job posting. It was like, wait a minute, this brings everything together. It's kind of like, I think when we were all kids, when we were in IT anyway, we loved to build Legos. And enterprise architecture is the ultimate Lego building profession. You get to take all of these pieces and build solutions out of them. And so that's kind of how I got into it. It was almost by accident, but I had done all of these different things, and I had found this profession that allowed me to bring them all together. And so that's kind of how I got into architecture.
Oh, cool. That's cool. So question from that, and we don't have to go super far down this path, but one of the most watched or not watched, listened to episodes of this podcast on YouTube is the one about platform architect. And I find that interesting. I'm still kind of learning as, why that is. But basically, platform owners, we need good platform architects, not necessarily enterprise architects, but we need good platform architects. And so if you were to just like take 60 seconds to give a platform owner advice on the type of person or the type of perspective that someone should come to kind of an architecture role with, what would that be?
So it depends. There are kind of four major categories of architect, right? There's the enterprise architect that's kind of the umbrella over everything. You have a business architect that really understands all the business capabilities, business processes, all of the things that the business are trying to do. And then you start getting into the technology pieces, right? You have the solution architect that actually builds out and designs these systems and how they work. Platform architects tend to fall mostly in that solution architect area, but there's also the technology architect. These are you've probably heard of like network architects and infrastructure architects. These are the people that really know how to make hardware dance and do all of the things that they need to do. So those platform architects kind of sit, and there's also data architects tend to fall in that technology architecture component as well. But those platform architects tend to fall somewhere in between the solution and technology architect. So which still means that they're going to need to have a broad range of technology disciplines. You don't need to be an expert necessarily, maybe in one thing, probably no more than one or two things. Otherwise, it gets really diluted. But you'll want exposure to as many different things as possible. A little bit of infrastructure, a little bit of database, right? A little bit of software and solution. But the biggest thing that you really need to have is that ability to see the big picture. You need to be able to see how many different moving parts and complex systems fit together. And getting too far into the weeds on stuff can hamper your ability to do that. And then what builds on that is you kind of need to be a bit of a strategic thinker. So you need to understand the business needs, business strategies, maybe some of the business processes, and be able to figure out and recommend strategies and solutions that fit within that.
That is awesome. So as a platform owner, because a lot of times platform owners, ServiceNow platform owners they're kind of putting that hat on every once in a while, right? Especially if they don't work for a large enough organization. They're putting the hat on of platform architect. And so you always feel like, well, I know I could use a platform architect, but sometimes it's really hard to articulate, the type of individual you need. So that's really valuable. I have a feeling people be like rewinding and listening back to that part again. So appreciate it. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into kind of the questions for today, and wanted to start out with just your perspective from an enterprise architect view of, what you expect from a ServiceNow platform owner. What kind of maybe communications you expect, what kind of collaboration, and just generally as we start out into this question, what are your expectations of a good ServiceNow platform owner?
Sure. So to an enterprise architect or really any architect in general, the most important part of the ServiceNow platform, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, is going to be that configuration management database or CMDB. Because architects need to be able to see how all the pieces fit together, and that tool really facilitates it because all the pieces are in there. The textbook definition of architecture is basically documenting all the pieces in an ecosystem and how they all relate to each other. That's really what that CMDB within ServiceNow does. And so when an architect's trying to look at the big picture, see what business capabilities are being served and how they're doing it, um, having a really good CMDB will help facilitate an architect's work. So an EA should be able to easily, look at all the contents in there, reports, dashboards. The whole idea would be to quickly determine what the current state of that entire technology portfolio. A lot of architects won't use necessarily the ServiceNow platform to design new things, but in order to get from point A to point B, you actually have to know what point A looks like. And so,
Yeah.
having the ability to be able to do that. So, setting up the ServiceNow platform so that an architect can go in and analyze this data, determine, maybe there's some redundancies here. A dashboard saying how healthy is everything. A lot of times you will feed a bunch of stuff into the ServiceNow CMDB in order to create these really cool reports that's going to allow you to build out a roadmap. So it's really just facilitating that access to data, reports, dashboards, so that an architect can quickly look at something and say, hey, I need to work on our e-banking system this month or something, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That is a very interesting answer. And I got to tell you, I like didn't expect you to go there, but I'm glad you did. So actually, like, the platform owner can, their best service for enterprise architecture is to take care of that CMDB,
yep.
do it right on the platform so that you get all of the value that we hear everyone talk about, right? From the CMDB and from ServiceNow. That's really interesting. How often do you feel like a platform owner should be in kind of communication and in touch with the enterprise architecture group or their assigned enterprise architect?
Um, it's going to kind of depend on the organization. In general, you want to have an open dialogue. Weekly might be too much, but if you have a bi-weekly, or even if the platform owner wants to just have open office hours several times a week, and the architects can come in there and ping them with ideas or needs or something, that is probably enough. I don't think you necessarily have to set up a formal regular meeting with the architects, because a lot of times if you can give them the access to the data and everything they need, they're pretty self-sufficient. They can just run with it, and then if they run into something, they'll just jump up and say, hey, can I come to office hours and talk about this kind of thing? So I think what I've seen that's been really effective from ServiceNow platform owners is setting up just those regular office hours, and they're for everybody. They can just come in and with platform questions or challenges or ideas for enhancements, that kind of thing.
What is the role of a platform owner in terms of staying in alignment with enterprise architecture?
So I would hope, and again, it'll depend on the organization, but hopefully you are in one that kind of facilitates the collaboration and cooperation between the different teams, and you'll be in large team meetings or something along those lines where you can just have open communication. I mean, from an architecture perspective, the best thing that we can do from a platform is just keep the CMDB running, keep it healthy, keep it current, which means now you're reaching out to other teams, right? You're reaching out to the infrastructure team to make sure that they're keeping all of their equipment information current, the software team to make sure all of their stuff is current. Sometimes you can set up a automated process that goes through and sort of certifies everything in the CMDB, just to kind of gently nudge people to remind them to keep that thing going. But really, it's hopefully you're in just this very team oriented environment that everybody is talking to everybody, and I mean, let's be honest, if you are running a IT ecosystem, I mean, ServiceNow is probably the center of your universe, and it behooves everyone to keep that CMDB current, because if there's an outage, it's going to tell you every bit and piece that you can check through and look for malfunctions and that kind of thing. I mean, it's so just I guess sometimes I know that when I was the CMDB owner, we had to not so gently knock on people's doors and get them to make sure they were keeping all of their stuff current. So I guess in that sense, being proactive is probably a really good idea. Just reaching out to people, making sure that there's nothing that they need or that they're actually keeping their things current. So that was
Yeah.
kind of a long rambling answer, but
No, no, it's good. Like everything that you're saying just helps kind of round out a platform owner's understanding of the enterprise architecture
And the other thing
perspective.
that a platform owner can do, because I know ServiceNow is such an innovative company and platform. They're always adding new features. They're always adding new capabilities. So some of the other things that I've seen doing brown bags, lunch and learns, that kind of thing, having ServiceNow themselves come down, specialists and whatever module that you want to talk to, just to, like show the PMO, the project management capabilities, or show somebody from security and compliance, all those compliance modules that they have. Doing a lot of internal marketing is also a good idea. That will help with the growth and health of the platform as well.
That's a great point. And it makes me think of another question. So a lot of times the platform owner is in the position of, let's say ServiceNow does come out with some new capability that either helps a new part of the organization or it really bolsters an existing part of the platform. How should a platform owner approach that? Because really, it's pretty easy to go, oh, hey, you can use this application and start the wheels turning without really getting the enterprise architecture who needs to be involved in the first place without even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a good point because you want everything to fit within what your overall business strategy is going to be, your overall technology strategy. You don't want something kind of just wild coming out of the woodwork. So one of the things that we have done, and we don't we include all of the platform owners in it, but we set up what was called an architecture review board.
Mhm.
And you can do something similar for the ServiceNow platform, right? If some new capability comes in, or you have a business user that wants to try something new, you have a group of, because if you're really lucky, you don't have one ServiceNow platform owner, you hopefully have a team. And, folks are
Yes.
specializing in various areas because if you're like one individual trying to manage this whole thing, I weep for you because it is just so big and complex. But
Well,
you'll
and
want
and
that.
the reality is that a lot of platform owners will find themselves in that position, where they don't have the product owners, maybe over ITSM or GRC or
Right.
things like that. Some do, like you said, the lucky ones do, but some don't. So your point is valid. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, no, it's fine. I was just saying, hopefully you will have this team of people that can represent the many different areas of ServiceNow, and you kind of set up this little review board. So when a product manager or a business stakeholder or somebody comes to you saying, "I want to look at this," or "I want to change, something we're doing with our help desk functionality or something," they can look at it. They'll have that level of SME knowledge. That they can tell them whether, yeah, we can do that, maybe we can do that, no, that's a really bad idea, but here's how I think we can do a better way.
Yeah.
um so I think setting up just that governance structure is probably very important. We had an architectural review board that, we had security, we had data, I mean, we had all these different representations. I think a similar model with ServiceNow is a great idea for governance, because you're you're also going to always be fighting that customization versus out of the box battle, right? And that
Yes.
that review board will help you with that.
Yes, yes, yes. I want to get to that out of box and customization question, but to kind of put a pin in this, there's probably a lot of people listening now who listen to what you just described, and they're connecting the dots back to kind of ServiceNow's prescribed or recommended governance structure, which I think if you're thinking that as you're listening to this, you're on the right track because what Chris is describing is essentially the technical governance pillar of of the governance triangle that I kind of call it the governance triangle. There's strategic, there is technical, and then there's kind of your portfolio. It's like the demand and delivery type of governance. So what you're describing fits squarely in that technical governance. So just
Yeah.
for our listeners, if that's the way your brain was headed, I think you're in the right direction. So you brought up balancing the customization and out of box, which is a tension that we're always encountering. You know that because
Yep.
you've watched it happen. And a lot of times the customization will come accidentally because a developer will just be like, well, we'll add this field over here on this CI class, not realizing that it's actually kept somewhere else in what ServiceNow calls the common service data model.
Yeah.
Things like that, right? But there are times where, because of business need, you go, you know what, this is going to add technical debt, but it's worth it, right? Because it balances out with what the business absolutely has to have. So I guess my question to you, from an enterprise architectural perspective, I mean, is it okay to carry some technical debt on the platform? Or is it something that you look at and you go, we really can't deal with technical debt. We don't want it. What are your perspectives on that?
Sure. So I'm glad you brought up the word technical debt. If there is a number one enemy to the architect, it is technical debt.
Okay.
Um, if so, I will say, to answer your question, is it okay? It is okay if there's a specific business requirement, a specific business reason, and it's not met anywhere else in the ServiceNow platform, then it's okay to add those customizations. In general, most architects will tell you, don't customize. They may use the word configure, which means, you're not going in and completely upending the base data models, or really messing with internal processes or anything. But, you can add a field here and there, or you can slightly change a form, which is more of a configuration thing. You're not completely, butchering anything that's under the covers.
Yeah.
Because any true customization of any sort of SaaS or PaaS platform is eventually going to lead you to an upgrade nightmare. You could eventually find yourself in a position where I can't upgrade this until I yank some stuff out.
Yeah.
So configuring an architect will be like, okay, it's not really technical debt, you're okay. But if you have to do some real super customization, they're going to say, okay, this has got to be a last resort thing. What other options do we have? The other caveat I will add to this, because everybody does it, don't use fields for other than their intended purpose. Because what's going to happen is, in a couple of years, they're going to create this really cool feature or report that relies on this field that you are now using for something completely different. And that's going to mess things up really badly. So,
Yes. And I'm sure people are listening to this going, yes, yes, I
yeah,
did that. I know I've done it
everybody
in the
has done
past.
it.
Yeah. Well, I guess the underscoring idea that I hear you saying is really, look, yes, steer clear of technical debt if you possibly can. If you have to, you really have to come at it with a lot of intentionality and kind of roll up your sleeves and go, okay, if this means technical debt, then, you know, how much, where exactly is it, what's the potential overhead of carrying it? And then I would add, I'll see if you agree with this, but I would add, you should probably, as a platform owner, have some idea of your strategy for unwinding that technical debt, right? How are we going to actually remove it? Because you're right that as the platform improves, and it always does, they may come up with a great way of handling whatever it is you're trying to handle to meet your business need. So having a strategy for removing it, do
Yeah,
we go as far as that?
I would completely agree with that. I mean, one of the things that we did is, going back to the architecture review board example, anytime somebody brought something that was going to create technical debt, they had to have a plan to get rid of it.
Hmm.
So,
Got it.
sometimes you just have to do things, for business reasons. The Congress came down and created this weird arbitrary compliance deadline, and you just have to meet it. And so you do the most expeditious thing possible, which may not be the best technical solution, but you have to have a solution to yank that out and fix it at some point.
Well, let's kind of shift gears. We've already talked a little bit about, okay, what does it look like for a platform owner to really collaborate well with an enterprise architect, talking about keeping the CMDB up to date so it's useful for enterprise architecture, and the idea of office hours and really always being available and the two-way communication always being there. But I guess maybe if we look at it from the other side of the coin, it might be useful to talk about what does enterprise architecture bring to the table for a platform owner? Because maybe somebody's listening to this going, great, I get it. They're a consumer of the platform, they're a consumer of the data. I get that, but what does enterprise architecture do for me as a ServiceNow platform owner?
I think there's a couple of things. One, again, if you're one of those platform owners that have so few people helping you out, I think you can make the enterprise architecture team or the enterprise architect or, whatever architect you have around you, you can kind of make them help you. They can really, you would probably own the overall health and, availability and just the fact that it's running of the CMDB. But really, they can help you manage all of the stuff that's in it, and making sure that it's clean and fits with all of the overall strategy of IT in the business because they're supposed to be doing all of that stuff anyway with their road mapping and overall just kind of technology plans. And so you might be able to get them to manage a lot of the overhead from the CMDB. My previous company, we actually did that. The architecture team was kind of responsible for managing a lot of the content within the CMDB. And then we would go out and bug the infrastructure teams to, update their records or, purge things that have been retired or, set up some automated processes to do that. So that's one thing. But they will also help the ServiceNow platform owner, I think, understand what the overall, business and technology strategies need to be so that they can help kind of guide and mold what the ServiceNow platform, will look like in 5 years. The architect can lay out, here's what our technology strategy is in 5 years. See all this really cool end user computing things. That may change how you'll do ServiceNow discovery or, various integrations or, hey, we're buying this really cool EA tool that can feed ServiceNow information. I mean, ServiceNow's got some wild integration capabilities. And one of the kind of primary responsibilities of an architect are integrations and data exchanges and that kind of thing. So they can really help you out with integrating ServiceNow into all of the other platforms and technologies across the enterprise. There's always some training and mentoring that we as architects like to do. I think some would say we just like to hear ourselves talk, but we want people to understand the strategies that are going on and what we have kind of cooked up for the next 5 years and how we want the organization to evolve and adapt and change and bring in new technologies like generative AI. What's that going to look like? And as a ServiceNow platform owner, you can kind of see what those plans are and maybe think of how they're going to impact you and what moves that you may need to make in the future.
So your answer to that question is gold. That's the ability to have visibility into all of that stuff is a massive benefit for the platform owner. It makes me think about, one of the things that I help a lot of platform owners and executive sponsors and, leadership types, right, is develop the strategy for the platform, right? And
Yep.
that's always based on what are the strategic priorities for the organization as a whole. And I've always thought, and I'd be interested in getting your opinion on this, that having an enterprise architect in the room is like having the ability to translate between those high level business objectives and, well, what does that mean just for how we use IT in the IT department, how we use technologies? Do you think that's a valuable piece for the enterprise architect, a valuable conversation for them to be in?
Oh, absolutely. A good enterprise architecture team will always serve as sort of that liaison and translator between business and technology. And ServiceNow, because it can do so many things. I mean, not only does it do IT service delivery, it can handle a lot of stuff for the business as well. And so having that architect in there to sort of translate is always a probably a valuable resource to have.
So the idea of understanding the business, right? That's something that I talk about a lot, because it's a prerequisite, really, for any technology. But we're talking about the ServiceNow platform. You have to understand what the business is trying to achieve. Your perspective on how enterprise architecture should play in terms of understanding the business. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that first, and then I'll
Sure.
probably have a follow-up question to you to kind of bring us down to the ServiceNow platform.
Well, if you're really lucky, you have a business process team in your organization. Most don't. So, leaning on the architect, particularly if they have any kind of business architect skills, is going to be really helpful there. Because what they're going to be able to do is sort of dig in and help you understand, what they're trying to get out of your platform. Because I've seen it in every organization I've been in. What happens is you get these tools and these technologies that can help automate and streamline a lot of things, but problem that occurs a lot is that they will go in and automate bad processes. And with ServiceNow, you've got a lot of business process automation, tooling in there that you can build. Sometimes it's the old adage, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So, again, we made the edict. We're not going to automate bad processes. So we make the business architect actually look at your processes before something goes into like a ServiceNow or a Pega or, a Bizagi or, whatever. So having that set of eyes there to make sure that you're not, just taking somebody's junk and moving it somewhere else is really useful.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I always talk about it as it seems to show up a lot in like service catalog and building catalog
Yes.
items and fulfillment processes. And I always tell people, don't just automate what's there because it's probably not that good, right? We should take a
Yeah.
look at it and figure out what those fulfillment processes are. But I can totally see how it applies to the broader business processes. Do you feel like there's enough understanding about what's important to the business, or do you feel like we have a long way to go in that area?
I think it depends on the organization. Some organizations that have kind of embraced the whole practice of business architecture, it is really well understood. Every capability is documented, every process is in there, every piece of technology that supports that process is documented. Most places don't have that. So I think most organizations have a really long way to go. Just making sure that you have a architecture team that's reaching out to the business, learning more, finding out what pain points executives have is really useful. If you don't have an architecture team, have your various platform teams do that, right? Your ServiceNow team can go, what are you not getting, in terms of responsiveness for when you have a problem or an incident? Have the various software teams reach out to their internal customers and make sure that they're getting what they want. It's all about communication, and unfortunately, a lot of organizations are so siloed that you don't get that. But that's the battle that you need to fight, either as a platform owner or as an architect, is breaking down those silos, or at least punching little holes in them so you can get in there and talk to them.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that visual. Well, I mean, so kind of moving to that, right? There's tons of opportunities to enable all kinds of different parts of the business with the ServiceNow platform. No shortage. That's never the problem. The problem is always, well, what do we do first and what do we do second? And actually, I would put a finer point on that, and that is identifying the problems that actually matter. But if we step back and zoom out just to get your perspective on it, what do you think some good ways to collaborate with those different business units are? We know we can't just go out and kind of wild west it as platform owners and go, hey, we got something over here for you. We got something over here for you. We know we have to include enterprise architecture. There's always security components. There's always like data management components, just a ton of different things. So from your perspective, what are good ways that a platform owner can collaborate well with those different business units?
Again, having that two-way communication with the business is super important because particularly in the business, folks don't necessarily realize what's the art of the possible until they've actually seen it. So it kind of goes back to that earlier thing, doing the brown bags, doing the lunch and learns, that kind of thing. Having ServiceNow themselves, or if you're partnering with a consultant, having them coming in and doing a dog and pony show of some of the capabilities that you as a platform owner think would really benefit your business customers, your business stakeholders.
I bet that it would make a lot of sense, at least in my opinion, of including the enterprise architecture group in those, right?
Well, and you should level your if you have architects, you should leverage them as much as humanly possible for bringing all of the different groups and disciplines together. They're really they'll pull whatever business units they need, but the rest of the people responsible for technology delivery, they have already hopefully built relationships with those people. They'll bring in security, they'll bring in infrastructure, they'll bring in network, they'll bring in whoever that they need to bring in, to kind of help the platform owner, craft their strategy, craft their plan, figure out what capabilities that they want to enable. Yeah, leverage your architects if you have them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, so let's wave the magic wand, right? And we've included enterprise architecture where we need to from the get-go. We're collaborating well with them. We are collaborating well with our fellow departments in our organization and different business units, and really, enterprise architecture is included in the whole thing. I kind of have two questions as we kind of raise our gaze and look towards the future, right? The first one is how as an enterprise architect, if you zoom out, how do you think about ServiceNow contributing to the typical organization's digital transformation and modernization?
Well, ServiceNow will, or platforms like it, will have to be at the center of it. Because again, any transformation that you do, you have to know what you're transforming. And all of that data, all of that information, all of that gooey goodness is in ServiceNow. It knows everything about your ecosystem. So if you want to transform something, you can look in there and see exactly what it's going to take. If you can be like, our customers say our online banking platform is awful, you can go in there and look at it and see everything. And you're like, you know what? We can modernize this database. We can modernize this. Oh, we can stop exchanging files and do, API integrations. If you want to do any kind of transformation, you have to know where you're starting from, and it's all in there.
You know what I love about that answer is you connected the end state, right? Hey, let's improve our customer experience on our website with all of the low level data, really,
Yeah.
that you have to have in order to do digital transformation. And so one of ServiceNow's contributions, obviously there's all kinds of automation, and now they have all of the generative AI stuff, but a really big contribution is the data in the platform, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, because the data is all in there. I mean, generative AI is nothing without the data, right? I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't know what to tell you. So yeah,
Yeah.
just the fact that it's all in there and you can actually ask it questions, like again, how well you've trained it, it'll depend, but it says, how can I improve the efficiency of my database ecosystem? And it can look through all of that data and you're like, well, you're using a database system that's 20 years old, you might want to replace that. I mean, it
Yeah.
can, if it's got that data, it can make recommendations on how to improve things for you.
So, second part of this kind of looking up at the future horizon, what I was hoping to gain is kind of insights for our listeners around how do you look at future proofing the ServiceNow platform, especially when you think about how rapidly things are evolving. And like just over the last couple of years, it seems like it's really sped up. Now, some of that's a lot of hype, right?
Of
But
course.
things do rapidly change. The landscape is always changing from a technology perspective, but then also the business is trying to pivot and adapt to changes in the business landscape. So, what do you think a platform owner should focus on from an enterprise architecture perspective? What should they focus on for kind of long-term success with a ServiceNow platform?
Well, predicting the future is going to be almost impossible. So the best thing a platform owner can do is at least make sure they're not putting down a bunch of rakes that they can step on.
I
So the
like
things that
that.
I would say as an enterprise architect, I mean, we mentioned this before, stay as close to out of the box as you possibly can. If you don't, future upgrades, future capabilities, all of this rapidly flying things, innovation that ServiceNow is doing, you may not be able to take advantage of it, and you may have to do a lot of elimination of technical debt before you can. So, again, that's number one. If you want your platform to be able to accommodate the things that are coming in the future, stay as close to out of the box as you can. We also mentioned a little bit about assigning owners to specific functions. I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. It really takes a village to effectively own and maintain a platform this big and complex.
So true.
Um, so having those owners that can focus in as much as possible on, sort of the big rocks, the CMDBs, the incident management, the change management, those kind of big rocks, it will help you more quickly, be able to pivot and adapt and accommodate new features and functionality. Skill development, make sure that the folks that own and manage the platforms are as well trained as they can be. If new features and functions are becoming part of the platform, make sure they get those skills updated, and then, they can actually probably really determine whether or not it will, help with, a business or technical challenge, or if it's just going to be, yeah, that's kind of cool, but it isn't for us. But, having that education and training and skills will really help. And then, leverage your architects, your business stakeholders, all of the people around you, keep them up to date on what the latest capabilities and features are in the ServiceNow platform. Have ServiceNow come in and do a quarterly update, say, this is all the neat new stuff that's coming, and then that'll start the wheels turning. And, maybe they can think that, hey, I really could use this in my business, or this really solves a problem for me. Make those around you do some of the work.
Actually, in your answer, it's interesting because you hit on several of the topic areas that actually, if you're going to fail at your digital transformation, you fail in those different areas that you mentioned,
You
right?
do.
It has very little to do with the technology. And I see it, unfortunately, a lot more in my line of work. It makes you fail in your ServiceNow implementation. Because failure being you're not getting the value out of it that you envisioned when you first, bought and implemented ServiceNow, or when you first went off on your kind of digital transformation journey. There's a lot of good stuff in that answer. I appreciate it. Well, so we're getting close on time. This has been an incredible conversation. I appreciate it. What most people probably won't understand, or maybe appreciate, maybe they will, Chris, is that this is like all one take. We haven't like stopped to do anything like, hey, I should redo this, which I think is a testament to your knowledge and your kind of deep understanding of how things should work from an enterprise architecture perspective. But as we kind of close up shop here for the conversation today, man, we've talked about a lot of different things, and there's been a lot of good nuggets. But are there any kind of key takeaways or maybe final advice that you would have for platform owners from the enterprise architect's view of the world?
So I will speak completely selfishly as an architect. The one thing that I would leave you with is treat the CMDB is the heart of your ServiceNow platform. It is also everything that we as architects hold dear for pretty much everything. So protect it like it's a one of a kind artifact in a museum. Make sure there's good governance processes around it. Keep it current. Keep running those health checks. But just keep that CMDB as beautiful and healthy as you possibly can, because then that will help you keep the rest of your ServiceNow platform in good condition. But again, just speaking selfishly as an architect, everything that we do and want to do is in that little bugger. So.
All right, sir. Well, I appreciate it. Hey, hopefully someday we can have you on again and maybe unpack specific topics here and there as I get questions or we come up with other questions. But I very much appreciate your time. Chris Munson, everybody. And Chris, if somebody has questions for you, are you okay with having them reach out to you, and how would they get a hold of you?
Oh heck yeah. I guess I'm everywhere, but LinkedIn is always good. Just look for Chris Munson, the enterprise architect, and you'll probably find me.
Okay, cool. And I'll put a link to you directly in LinkedIn in
Excellent.
the show notes so that everybody can they don't have to chase around which Chris Munson it is.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, appreciate it, brother, and we'll talk soon.